our border being open is a primary source of human trafficking. I was just reading an article about a slaughterhouse on the West Coast that was just raided because they were using child labor from immigrants coming across the border, illegal immigrants coming across the border, and they outsource the labor to some company that brings in temporary workers, and they were kids that they were bringing in. But this is the problem, folks. You know, I hear all the time from my colleagues in Albany how important, you know, human trafficking, we have to address human trafficking, and they're making every hotel and restaurant post signs in the bathroom about human trafficking, but they've done nothing to secure our border. They've done nothing to address the human trafficking, the sexual abuse, the rapes, everything else that happened. It's just such hypocrisy to listen to talk about this. You know, I have to post something in the bathroom of my business about human trafficking while they leave the spigots wide open for this to happen. So it's really, it aggravates me. And these folks like this are working hard to try to do something about it. Meanwhile, the flow continues. Meanwhile, nothing is being done to address the source of the problem. And that's really what's going on. That's I think the battle that we're all fighting. Mel talked about our lawsuit, and I have to tell you, it was September 13th that we were in Rochester, and we were then some of the folks that are here were there at the Appellate Division in downtown Rochester, this court where the appeal, because we won our case last year, right, against the governor for her illegal isolation and quarantine. I think you all know that, and you're all pretty well informed here. So, but of course the governor has all of our money to work with, so she appealed, right. And now they are at the Appellate Division. And on that day, on September 13th, was when an oral argument was heard. And Bobbie Anne Cox, our hero of an attorney, she's done an amazing job. This is one woman fighting this huge battle all by herself. You know, obviously with our help, but really at the end of the day, she's the one that sacrificed so much in her life. But it was an amazing day because we had about 400 people show up. Yeah, Liz Nixon was there, several other people were there, and just to show up, and not like, you know, not like the left does, not, you know, yelling and screaming and burning and looting, and no, respectfully to be there to say, this is important to us. Our freedom is important to us. And they were in the courtroom, and not a peep. You could hear a pin drop the entire time. No one said a word. And outside, you know, there was an overflow crowd. And outside, even in the you know, the foyer entryway into the courthouse or into the courtroom, they were there, and then outside on the street. But the bottom line is that people are finally understanding and paying attention. You know, we let so much of our liberties go during the pandemic. You know, it's amazing what a little bit of fear and a lot of propaganda will do, and that's really what happened. And people, you know, I love Benjamin Franklin as far as our founding fathers. He had the best quotes, and one of his best quotes, he said it many different ways, many different times. Essentially, he said, and I'm paraphrasing, that those that sacrifice essential liberty for some temporary security end up with neither, or they also said, or deserve neither. He said it all that way as well. But that's the truth, right? That's what's happened, and we're experiencing that right now. So this isolation and quarantine lawsuit was so vitally important because this was so wrong on a number of levels. First and foremost, our lawsuit is on the separation of powers because the state legislature spoke, or didn't speak actually, because a bill was introduced back in 2015. You probably heard of this, Assembly Bill 416, A416. That was during I'm trying to think of it. That was not the pandemic, but prior to that, the Ebola virus, and the whole idea that you could just pull people from their homes because that they were a public health threat, right? So that bill never went anywhere. It never had a companion piece of legislation in the Senate. It never had a co-sponsor. It never made it onto an agenda of a committee, and of course, it never made it to a vote. So what did Kathy Hochul and the Department of Health do? Well, they just did a copy and paste of that bill, removed any of the due process that was in that bill, and made it into the Department of Health regulation. And that was, the DOH 2.13, which was the isolation and quarantine rules. And number one, that's a violation of separation of powers. The fact that the legislature that bill never went anywhere is a clear indication that there was no appetite on the part of the legislature to do anything like that. But then you add to it that there was also just a complete violation of basic civil liberties. The fact that someone from the Department of Health could show up at your door without any proof of any kind, saying, I believe you were exposed to X. And of course the governor wanted to make it about COVID, but there's a long list of diseases that could trigger this health code violation, and including things that are not communicable diseases. I mean, some of the things on the list are botulism, which is nasty, but it's not a communicable disease. Lyme disease is on the list. And here's the best one, toxic shock syndrome. I swear to God I'm not making this up, that's on the list. So, so that means that a Department of Health official could show up at your door and say, I believe your child was exposed to botulism, and we're taking your child. And could show up with law enforcement. No due process, no proof, and take your child. It actually says, and there's no age restriction. It could be a child, it could be your elderly parents, it could be anyone, literally anyone. This is the kind of thing that would make Xi Jinping blush. It was that bad. It was the kind of thing you see in a totalitarian dictatorship. And the fact that this 14-page summary from Judge Plotz, who just absolutely decimated everything from the due process to the violation of the current isolation and quarantine rules that are already existing. It was conflicting with the law. The fact that it was a violation of separation of powers, on and on and on, in 14 pages. And then the fact that despite all that, the governor and the attorney general said, we're going to appeal this anyway, hoping that they could get some judges to rule in their favor. Well, on the 13th, I can tell you I was there, and not only Bobbie Anne did an amazing job in her presentation, an amazing job, but to look at the body language and listen to questions from the judges, I feel confident that they're going to do the right thing and rule in our favor again. But then, of course, she could try to appeal again to the Court of Appeals, the highest court in the states. But this is really important, folks. This is not just about isolation and quarantine. This is about, does the executive branch, does the bureaucracy have the right to overrule the legislature? And the answer is no. But if the judges decide that they could say, well, you know what? I think, and any other agency could decide they're going to write their own laws and put them in, as administrative code. And that's really the problem here, is that it is setting a precedent. And not just for this situation, not even just for this state. It could set a precedent nationwide. So this is an important case. And I'm proud to be the lead plaintiff. And probably the best part for me is the fact that it actually is called Borrello versus Hochul.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Why don't we get the hell out of here? Get her the hell out of there.
That's a good question. And there is no recall. That's a good point. There is no recall in New York State. I will tell you though that she won by a very slim margin, and I guarantee you that the couple 100,000, well, I think it was 150,000 votes. I guarantee there's more than 150,000 people that voted for her that are having some buyer's remorse right now. I'm sure, as they watch what she has done and how inept she has been. And this dictatorship that she's created. We all thought Cuomo was bad. My God, she's proving to be far worse. And on top of everything else, to answer your question, there is no recall in New York State.
I'm not asking for a recall. I'm talking about sending the state police and have her arrested and get her out of there because she's not following the Constitution.
Yeah, and
she's doing exactly what she wants, no matter what.
The only way to do that is the way we are doing it, which is through the courts. It's the only way it can be done. There is no way to send the state police in there. Yes, she's a violation of the Constitution, but the only way that can be cured is through the legal system, the court system, and that's it's unfortunate. The bottom line is the power that the people have is to vote her out, to vote other folks out that support this, because quite frankly, my Democrat colleagues, every single one of them have been silent on this. They haven't said a word about this.
We're not going to win any elections because they're cheating like hell.
So you know what? That's the problem. Folks like this say this, and I understand. Is there cheating out there? I believe that there is. But when you say things like that, it's that people just say, well, it's hopeless, I'm not going to vote. That's what they want. But that's what they want. They want folks to just give up and say, we're not going to vote anymore. There is strength in numbers. We can push back. We can defeat. Look at what happened in some of the other elections down on Long Island and so forth. It can be done. We can push back. The thing is that people need to wake up to the fact that this is what's going on. You know what the biggest problem is? The biggest problem is that, look at some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle in areas that used to be held by Republicans that are now Democrats. They're up there talking about how they don't like this and don't like that. They're trying to appease folks. But at the end of the day, how do they vote in Albany? They vote right along with every other Democrat. They vote right along with the governor. So the problem that we have here is apathy, and the fact that you know what, I don't like what's going on here, but my guy's okay. Okay, there's a lot of folks here in upstate New York that are being represented by people that are nothing but bootlickers to the New York City radicals, and they get reelected. And they get supported, by the way, by organizations like chambers of commerces and business organizations, and gun people actually support some of these folks, believe it or not. So if every gun owner in New York State voted the right way, we could change this state tomorrow, but they don't. That's a problem too. They will stand by and watch this illegal, unconstitutional things like these new background checks for ammunition, okay? And yet, most people that own a firearm don't vote in New York State, which is really kind of sad. So it can happen, it can change. We have to do what they do, and that is organize, get behind folks, and support those folks. And that's the problem. Yes?
It's a little sarcastic.
Okay.
How many years do we have to wait for the courts to step in and stop New York State from attacking our Second Amendment rights? They've lost their minds in Albany. All we got is the courts, and they're sitting back doing nothing.
Well, the courts act when someone brings a lawsuit, which is what I did recently against the background checks. We filed a lawsuit about a week ago. The courts aren't going to act unless someone brings a lawsuit, and that's the last bastion. So, and that's what we've been doing. By the way, you saw the concealed carry law that was finally overturned. That happened at the Supreme Court level. We've had other cases here locally that we've been able to be victorious, but unfortunately it takes a long time, and that's the problem. I mean, this lawsuit that we filed on the background checks, we filed a temporary restraining order because the system wasn't working. People were not able to purchase ammunition, which is a clear violation of their Second Amendment rights, and the court would not issue a temporary restraining order. We just simply said, the system's not working, it's broke. It's not, and people aren't able to make the purchases. You need to restrain them from doing this until they can at least get it right, and the answer was no from the court. That's the problem. Yeah.
To follow up what you said
Yeah.
5 minutes ago, what percentage of Republicans in New York State did not show up to those votes?
Yeah, that's a
20, 30, 40%, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Easily enough, even 5% of them showed up, we would have won the election.
Yeah, it came very close. And you have to understand too that there's a lot of organizations that are boots on the ground. The polls showed that Lee Zeldin was within the margin of error in most polls. In some cases, he was ahead. But at the very end, special interest groups that make a lot of money from all the money that Albany throws around, they were boots on the ground, literally going door to door, getting people out to vote, harvesting ballots, everything else. And that's really what did things at the end. So again, we have to play that same game. I know that everybody wants to be patriotic and vote on election day, but that's not the way we win. We win by doing the same things that they are doing, which are legal in New York State. Getting those ballots, making sure that people are voting, even if they're out of town. Oh, I didn't, you know what, I was on vacation, I forgot, all these ridiculous reasons. This is important, folks. One of the most important things you will do will decide whether or not your government serves you. And you do that at the ballot box. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. You just said we have to do what they do, but that's going against the Constitution.
No, it's legal what they're doing. What they're doing is, I'm saying that if there are folks out there, that are making sure that people they're driving people to the polls, they're calling people up saying, are you going to be out of town? Make sure you get an absentee ballot. All those things are legal in New York State. Ballot harvesting, as much as I dislike it, is legal in New York State.
I don't care what you say about New York State. This state is so corrupt. The Constitution overrules everything.
I agree.
You said there's no way to get rid of Hochul. But if you're going according to the Constitution, not the Act of 1871, the sheriff has more power than she does.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. I've seen no evidence for that, to be quite honest with you. And I realize that there are folks that this constitutional county understand it. You can be a constitutional county, and God bless those that are. We're going to follow the Constitution. But I don't. I've looked into this, I've read it, I'm not sure, and I know there's some sheriff that goes around, gets paid $50,000 to appear places and tell you about constitutional counties, but I still haven't seen the evidence that the sheriff in
All you
Hochul.
gotta do is research the Constitution, what our forefathers did.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just, all you gotta do is just take one word and switch it, and everybody thinks, no, you can't do that. But do the constitutional research.
Ma'am, I'm just telling you that I think that there are a lot of sheriffs out there that I've spoken to about this, and you know, I know there's one gentleman that goes around and he gets paid a lot of money to speak about this topic. But I would just be cautious that you know, if it was that easy, somebody would have done it by now. Yes.
I have an old one.
Sure.
According to the Guns and Ammo magazine, New York State ranks last in Second Amendment rights in the United States.
Yeah.
We are dead last. Myself personally, I'm tired of being treated like a criminal. Our governor said she's concerned about New York State's safety, the residents of New York State's safety, but yet she turns around and puts the criminals right back out in the street.
That's absolutely the case, and that's been, you know, the thing that I've argued is certainly the basis for my lawsuit. The fact of the matter is, the criminals don't follow those rules. All right, that's probably the basic thing that they don't understand. So when you talk about, first and foremost, better than 90% of gun crimes are committed with illegally possessed weapons. You want to know what happens when someone is caught with a illegally possessed weapon? They get an appearance ticket and they're released back on the street. And when that same criminal gets caught with another illegally possessed weapon, you know what happens? He gets released and back onto the street over and over and over again until they commit a crime with that gun. So they talk about how they want to get weapons off the streets. No, they want to take firearms out of the hands of law-abiding citizens. That's the only thing they want to do. Because they want to just think about gun crime, they start with the people that are using the guns to commit crimes. Those folks get a pass. And that's really the problem. That's why this is not about public safety. This is about controlling the public. You know, this is not about... every dictatorship starts off by saying, we have to take your guns away from you for your own good. Okay, and you know, and this background check for ammunition. Not only is it ridiculous, it's going to put people out of business, which is what they want. They want people to be, they don't want gun shops, they don't want people selling ammunition, they don't want kids doing trap shooting. They want all that to stop. But here where we live, Pennsylvania's right there. You can go across the border, buy ammunition in Pennsylvania. It's legal to do so. So what are you really doing? What are you accomplishing? And do you think for 1 minute that some gangbanger with an illegal weapon goes to Walmart to get bullets? No, I don't think so. But that's because they don't understand. You know, this is just this virtue signaling. You know, the folks that are, you know, look, I think there's people at the top of this food chain that are truly, you know, trying to obviously turn New York State into a third world country. Okay, but there's a lot of useful idiots in that food chain who think that these things are going to somehow help. And then there's those who just support it because it's the easiest thing for them to do. Just say, oh, look what I did to stop gun violence in New York State. That's you know. So there's a lot of folks that you know. What I say, that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So there's a lot of people with good intentions out there that are willing to violate our basic constitutional rights to do so. But you know, I wanted to talk about some other things that are going on as well. We talked about the isolation and quarantine lawsuit. I brought some notes, but you know, the Concealed Carry Improvement Act, which was one of the most recent ones. This whole idea of sensitive locations. Are you guys familiar with all this? I'm sure you are. So one of the things that we've also I introduced a bill along with Assemblyman Joe Giglio that would allow judges to be able to carry their licensed guns into court again, because they are now a sensitive location. Now think about where we live. Think about these courts, these night courts, where people go, you know, to pay traffic tickets and to also be adjudicated for criminal activity. There's no metal detectors, there's no security. It's just a judge and a clerk and maybe a couple of lawyers. You know, that's not a sensitive area. Those are soft targets, is what those are. And the fact that the New York State Magistrates Association went to the state and said, this is a problem. Here's the problem. I believe it's 60% of courts in New York State have no security whatsoever. No. So what about all those judges? What are you going to do about this? Either you mandate security and pay for it, you know, or you allow the judges to at least, you know, carry their guns like they used to, their concealed weapons. And they came back and said, we're not going to do anything about it. That's the problem. So, you know, it's one thing to say you want to create a sensitive location, but to leave those folks vulnerable is absolutely ridiculous. And you know, yes, when you go to some court in New York City, they've got, you know, metal detectors and bailiffs and security and everything else, but we don't have that up here. But again, this just shows you that they really don't care about what happens up here and how those folks are left. And with these ridiculous bail laws, and so many people are showing up at these courts that have been, you know, accused of, you know, pretty serious crimes where they got an appearance ticket instead of being, you know, put in jail where they belong. You got a lot of pretty violent folks that are ending up in these courts in these small towns. So it's a problem.
It's gonna get worse when they bring in the illegals too.
Well, that is another huge issue. You know,
Yeah.
there's no doubt
Isn't
about
that
it.
racketeering? Because that landlord's gonna make $3 million in a year? That's our tax money.
Well,
That should not be allowed.
I totally agree. First of all, let's start with the first and foremost. We have to secure the board. We talked about that already. But here's the other thing too. You know, the governor is wringing her hands about all this, and the mayor of New York City. But New York State is still a sanctuary state. New York City is still a sanctuary city. You know, I've called on again and again, you need to repeal that sanctuary status. That is a magnet, okay? I know it sounds great, and look at when they came up with the sanctuary status, they patted themselves on the back, and we're so compassionate, and we're so enlightened, and we're so much better than you folks because we're going to welcome all these people here. And it all sounded great until the people showed up. Then they're like, they didn't know what to do. Well, we gotta get these people the hell out of here. Let's just ship them upstate.
We didn't vote on it. How does it go through?
That
We
went
don't
in
vote
as
on it.
that went in as an executive order. Wait a minute.
That was it.
Yeah.
I had that before, a good source.
Yeah, New York City voted for it. The New York City Council voted for it, not the people of New York
Right.
City. And look, if they want that in New York City, you understand this is what you're going to deal with. New York State, this was done in 2017 as an executive order by Andrew Cuomo, and Kathy Hochul could reverse it with a stroke of a pen, but she won't. That's the sad truth.
I thought executive orders were only for the damn president. These guys do whatever the hell they want.
They absolutely.
This
This is the problem.
bullshit.
This is why the people need to stand up and say that this is wrong.
Why don't we have a recall for our governor? Why can't?
Yeah, it was never written into the Constitution. If you could, you could introduce a constitutional amendment to do so. Absolutely, you can change it. To change the Constitution, you have to introduce the bill. It's got to get brought up. And, unfortunately, corruption is built into the cake in Albany because the party in power, the Democrats, determine if bills actually get to the floor to get voted on. So I could introduce a bill. But if they don't like it, it'll never get there and to be actually be voted on. But we'd have to have, it would have to be past 2 consecutive sessions of the legislature, which means 2 years, two consecutive 2-year terms. The legislation would have to pass twice, then it would have to be signed by the governor, and then it would have to be put onto a public referendum. That's how you change the Constitution. in New York
No,
State.
we need to go back to the Constitution straight out.
Yeah, well, that's,
what
I'm
we
talking
need
about the
to
New York
do.
State Constitution. But yeah, that, so that.
No, I mean straight across the board, the whole country. Go right back to the Constitution.
There's no doubt, look at, that is the fundamental document, the Bill of Rights. That's the fundamental document in particular here, and we've seen the assault on those basic rights, so simply, and as I said, the whole idea of due process, the whole idea of civil liberties, which was the basis of our
No.
lawsuit.
I'm not talking about going to court or none of that. I'm talking something a little better than that.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna have to follow the rules in order to try and get this accomplished.
Yeah, there's a rule to be followed.
Yeah, so, any other questions? There have been calls for a special session of the legislature. Right now, the legislature is out of session until January. Now, we've typically been called in for special sessions for certain things, throughout the course of the year. But there has been calls for a special session to address, the so-called migrant crisis, which is a self-created crisis. And quite frankly, I'd like to see all of my fellow legislators in both parties have to raise their hands and vote and say, yeah, I want to send people that are here illegally upstate, and because I want to see my colleagues on this side of the aisle upstate vote for that, because I think that'd be important for them to have to stand up, hopefully stand up for their constituents and say no. but I have a feeling most of them won't. And that's an important thing, so I do think that we should go back for a special session. That we should have to, by the way, right now, there was money budgeted, about $1 billion in this last budget to address the migrant crisis in New York City. But anything beyond that is, at this point, in my opinion, is illegally done, because anything beyond that original budgeted $1 billion has to be approved by the legislature. That's very clear, that these appropriations have to be approved by the legislature. So we should go back and have to vote on it. I know how I'm going to vote, but I would like to see some other colleagues that are really, in my opinion, betraying the folks they represent, particularly upstate, by supporting this. So there's no doubt that there are a lot of legislators in New York City that would likely vote yes. But I can tell you what, the ones on Staten Island right now, I don't see them voting yes. There's a lot of folks, even in the Bronx and Queens and other areas of the city that are getting fed up. The only folks that seem to be standing behind all this are the ones in Manhattan. And that's not enough of them to support this funding. So I believe that a special session will certainly pull back the veil to see who is really interested in supporting the people of this state over the invaders.
Yeah, I got a question.
Sure.
On this next check on ammunition,
Yeah.
who set the price on it?
Well, that was done. So this is actually something that was done way back in the SAFE Act that
Yeah,
Hochul just
I
now.
understand
Yeah. So who set the rate? I can't tell you who set it. I think it was set in legislation.
If I know New York State good enough, that's only a start.
Yeah. Well, well, it's not so much about the money, although the money is still an issue. But the bottom line is that they are charging you. Number one, they're charging you to exercise a constitutional right. Imagine if someone proposed charging someone a poll tax to show up and cast a vote. I think that they'd be upset about that. But this is this is in a similar vein. But most importantly, they created this system that's not working, and I think that's by intention. I think that's on purpose, that they want a system that just isn't functioning properly, because this is a way to make this more difficult. Look, if they could, they would just outlaw guns in New York State. My colleagues on this side of the aisle would vote for that in a New York minute, no pun intended. But they know that they can't. They know that that's such a blatant violation of the Second Amendment. So instead, they want to make it difficult, if not impossible, to exercise your Second Amendment rights. And that's what all this NICS check, the fact that now the state police is a middleman, essentially, between. And by the way, it was no charge for the federal government to do these background checks, okay? And they happen. You could do it on weekends. You could do it whenever. Now these checks are only being done Monday through Friday during business hours. So again, they're doing whatever they can, to impede people's ability to exercise that right. That's the plan.
All right, I got a question.
Well, so this gentleman over here, yeah.
And you have to remember, when you go, because if you look at the signs at Runnings and other schools, you have to give your name, address, phone number. They're creating a list
And your occupation.
of who's buying stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not only gun check, but now they're saying what you're buying is ammo, so they can keep that as a registry in New York State, which is where this becomes wrong, because it's against the Second Amendment.
That's
But
right.
they're trying to create their own list in New York State of what we're doing, which is why, as the Senator said earlier, across the border.
Yeah, and look, the lawsuit that I brought recently, with the support of the New York State Firearms Association, addresses that exact point. They're paying for a very good law firm out of Washington D.C. in conjunction with an attorney here in New York State to bring this lawsuit against the background check for ammunition. In fact, they are collecting that data, and what are they doing with that data? But the bottom line is, this is the only recourse that we have. Andy Goodell says it best. I mean, there's not a day that goes by when we're in session that we don't pass a bill that's a violation of the Constitution of the state or federal. It happens almost every day in New York State. But the only remedy there, because of one-party rule in New York State, the only remedy there is through the courts, and that's what we have to do.
Okay, my question
No,
is,
wait, let other people have their say, okay?
this is an important one.
No, I just want to make sure, does anybody else have a question first, because I want them to be.
This is important.
Yeah.
If I'm going to buy a firearm out of state, okay, I go through the federal background check, everything gets done, I bring it back into New York. What happens then? I mean, the federal outranks the state.
Yeah, there's all kinds of issues, but again, this is not this system is nothing but an appeasement to the folks on the left that think that that if you outlaw guns, that's going to take the violence away. I mean, let's face it, the most violent cities in the United States are the ones where guns are practically illegal now anyway. In New York City, it's very difficult to get a gun. It's the most violent city, one of the most violent cities in the world right now. It used to be one of the safest cities. So there's no question that whatever rules they're putting in place they have more holes in it than Swiss cheese. But again, it makes people feel good that they're doing something. That's weird. That's the whole idea. Well, I want to pretend like I'm doing something. Same thing with climate change. They want to pretend they're doing something about climate change. With these ridiculous wind and solar projects, because which are going to do nothing, by the way, at all. But they want to pretend they're doing something about climate change. And Kathy Hochul is the queen of pretending. Yeah.
Why has the Supreme Court not stepped in? Because obviously it was a clear reaction to their ruling that made Kathy Hochul do all this.
Well, again, that's the whole thing, right? So it took years. By the way, that the Concealed Carry Act that the Supreme Court overturned, that case was from decades ago. It took that long to finally get heard at the United States Supreme Court. Well, the court doesn't just do something when the system is now. So Kathy Hochul and the Democrats passed this bill last July, the Concealed Carry Improvement Act, and now that has to be challenged in court. And it is. It's being challenged in court, but it has to go up the rank. It has to start at the state Supreme Court, then it has to go to the Appellate Division, then it has to go to the Court of Appeals, if the Court of Appeals will hear it. It's not mandatory that they hear it. And then if that doesn't work, is there a federal case? That's the problem. Like I said, they pass bills, the government signs bills every day that are unconstitutional. But that's the problem with one-party rule. I don't care if you're a registered Democrat, a registered Republican, you're not registered to any party at all. You should be very concerned about one party controlling everything in the state. Look at what has happened in such a short period of time. Okay, they flipped the New York State Senate from Republican to Democrat. They took office in January of 2019, and look at what has happened in 4 short years. Look at how terrible things have gotten in 4 short years. And that's the impact of one-party rule. Again, that's a dictatorship. That's the problem.
How did that happen?
Yeah, we got Cecilia in the back and then also Skip in the back.
I just have a couple of questions. So you said that it is legal to go to Pennsylvania for New York residents to buy ammo?
Ammunition,
correct?
yeah,
Okay.
that's my understanding.
And you're saying that the system's not working, which we all know it has not been working at the past couple weekend gun shows?
Yeah.
Correct. So what happens when it's not working for these dealers? These people just aren't buying ammo.
That's what I mean. I've heard from a lot of folks. People just walk out, or sometimes it takes hours before. And then by then, if you're going to a gun shop and you've got whatever a half an hour of your time, and it takes 3 or 4 hours for them to get an answer back. People are walking away. They're
right. The
making
system.
a purchase.
I know the system's been shutting down.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems with the system. Like I said, this is why we filed a temporary restraining order, but the court rejected it.
Okay, but you also said, sorry, you also said that, is it NICS checks or the New York State checks that are only going to be Monday through Friday?
It's the New York State check, but my understanding is there's no infrastructure in place for the state to actually do a background check. They're just going to the federal system.
So they're piggy bank?
They're a middleman.
They're using the system.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the one thing that's happening is though, they're encouraging small gun dealers to close.
That's
They already
no doubt
are.
about it.
They're already closing.
And that's what's
Yeah.
happened, so they are actually accomplishing what they wanna do is to
Correct.
eliminate.
Yeah, again, this is about them making it difficult, if not impossible, for people to be able to exercise their rights.
Skip and Johanna.
Who is responsible? The county on voter rolls to clean them up? Is it the county or is it a state function?
It's a state function. So and I know there's some folks that Citizens Audit that have uncovered all these folks that have not clearly should not be. There's hundreds of thousands of registrations apparently that are people that are just no longer valid, people that have died, moved away, whatever. Other states have cleaned up their rolls. So there's something called the Federal Motor Voter Act, And Judicial Watch, everybody familiar with Judicial Watch? Okay, Judicial Watch has brought lawsuits in those states that, under the Federal Motor Voter Act, forcing those states to clean up their rolls. That should happen in New York State. Now, I can tell you that Bobbie Anne Cox has counseled the citizens audit folks and said, because they show up at all of our meetings, and I understand that, and they've got this evidence about all these folks, but they could bring a lawsuit. They should bring a lawsuit, and they could sue under the Federal Motor Voter Act, just like Judicial Watch did, and they could force New York State to clean up its rolls, but that has yet to happen. Yes.
They're trying to raise over $1 million to do that. That's the problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, they've raised a lot of money, and I'm hoping that they're going to use it to actually
Well,
bring
they
a
don't
lawsuit.
have anywhere near what they need. They want to do that. Randy
Yeah.
Barber has spoken in my living room twice recently. They
Well,
want to do that. They just
Yeah,
don't have the
they've
money.
been talking about it for 2 years, and look, I appreciate what they're doing, I really do. But at some point, you got to take action. You know,
I can tell you on that, we do have a lawyer lined up. It took a while to get somebody on board, and we're now collecting the money, which now the Attorney General is trying to drain our funds to,
yeah,
with her
that's,
cease and desist order that she put out there. But we are raising money, and they are meeting with some big donors upstate that are trying to help us move forward with this.
that's great, that's how we, that's how we did the isolation and quarantine lawsuit, so that's great, I'm glad to hear that, that's great. That's the key to cleaning up the rolls. That Federal Motor Voter Act has been successful in other states, and I hope that they get there, and I'll do whatever I can to support that. Yeah.
John?
With regards to all these migrants coming to our state and perhaps our county, we don't know who they are, and I feel like we're just waiting for hellfire to rain down on us. What could we do?
Well, I'd say first and foremost, we've had some great leadership in this county. The county, the PJ Wendell, our county executive, has declared a state of emergency. So far, the governor has honored those counties that have said we don't want them here, we don't have the resources. But to your point, they're often referred to as undocumented immigrants, right? Well, that's right. Undocumented means we don't know who they are. We don't know their background. Look what's going on in Erie County. The county executive there was very sanctimonious when he said, shame on all you counties that declared states of emergency, and this is how we're going to grow Erie County with immigrants. And now look what's happening there. I mean, tuberculosis, rape, assaults, overcrowding. People in New York City. I was just in New York City. It's horrific there. What's going on? You've got these illegal immigrants down there riding around on unregistered motorcycles, running into people. I mean, it's a problem. But again, this all sounded great when those folks were down in Texas and Arizona and New Mexico. It all sounded great up here in New York that we're going to be compassionate and we're going to welcome all. But now that they're here and the chaos has ensued, they don't know what to do about it. So the thing is that there should not be a dime more spent until they rescind their sanctuary policies. Period. There should not be a dime more spent, no dime more given to the city, and the state should not spend any more money. And they want to talk to Joe Biden about federal support. Talk to Joe Biden about securing the border. You want to do something? Kathy Hochul is the governor of one of the biggest, most powerful states in the United States. She could stand up and say, secure the border, Mr. President. Stop what you're doing. But she won't do that. Instead, she just wants more money. When the sink's overflowing, what do? You turn off the spigot. You don't just bring in more buckets. They're just bringing in more buckets and letting the spigot run. That's the problem. Yes. Yes.
So, in Erie County and the illegal aliens that are there, are they free to do whatever they want? I mean, what?
Well, I don't think they have ankle monitors on. I mean, what do you mean? I don't think they're being watched. Well, let me tell you something. This .go company, which is a horribly corrupt company, horribly corrupt company. Did you ever see the president and founder of the company lied on his resume? He said he had a graduate degree from a college that never heard of him. Just a complete POS. And the mayor of New York City gave them a $425 million no-bid contract to ship people upstate. And then what did they do? They went to all these hotels and motels with security. They threatened media that were trying to find out what was going on there. So these are the folks that are in charge of this, of these movements of migrants from New York City to upstate. So it's a problem, So there's no, what law enforcement is doing is responding to issues when 911 is called. But as far as the day-to-day, it's this .go company that's in charge.
So are they responsible if they leave the area and go off
through the country?
Good question. Who knows? That's the problem. And this is what they want. They know that, and the dirty little secret is that they're only paying for like a couple months. What happens after that? It's just, at that point, it's not Mayor Adams' problem anymore. He doesn't really care where they go. He just wants to get them out of New York City.
So are they, getting like welfare and all that stuff?
Well, in New York State, they're eligible for, a lot of things. That's again, my colleagues have decided that anybody that shows up in New York State from anywhere in the world under any circumstances qualifies for everything. And that's another unfortunate. This is the government that we have. So when you hear somebody that's in one of the other counties upstate that says my guy's okay, no. And I would implore you, everyone in this room, I guarantee you, belongs to some kind of a statewide organization that you pay dues for. You might pay $25 a year, or you might be a real estate agent who pays, a lot of money to belong to the Realtors Association. Find out who they're supporting. Find out who they're writing checks to. I guarantee you, there's an organization you belong to that's writing checks to people that are supporting things like this.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The thing with New York City, I know, they're talking about rescinding that
Sanctuary
city, but.
They're not talking about it.
Go through the legislature, don't they, on that?
Well, first of all, New York City there's nobody there talking about, nobody in an elected office anyway that's talking about rescinding it in the city council. So sadly, I will tell you that even there are some Republicans on the city council. I've heard none of them talk about rescinding the sanctuary status. So that's kind of sad, right? But at the state level, this is an executive order. Like I said, Kathy Hochul could pull out her pen and change that in a minute, and she hasn't. So you want to know who's responsible for the continued sanctuary status of New York State? It's Kathy Hochul, one person.
That's worth a call a week?
Yeah, yeah. Write some letters, send some emails, make some phone calls. I would agree.
What's the, do you have a sense as to what the consensus among counties in the state are about this issue?
I can't remember the number, but I want to say a majority of the counties have created some kind of either emergency order, a state of emergency, or have publicly spoken against the migrants coming up from New York City. A majority of the counties.
I think there's 42 of them.
Yeah, that's it, which would be which are 62. Yeah, so yeah.
So are they petitioning the state government?
Absolutely, I can tell you that. In fact, I just talked to PJ Wendell today. He's so we have a statewide organization called NISAC, the New York State Association of Counties, and they are it's an organization of all the county executives and county governments in the state, and they are actively pushing back against all this. Absolutely, that's
Carol,
Yes.
you have a question?
I do. Our state, okay, so the taxes, we've got state funding going towards the illegals as well as federal funding. But if we're like saying that we don't want it, isn't there something we can do as we the people for fighting back that our taxes, like I don't think Chautauqua County should be paying taxes going to New York City. Isn't there like some law against that?
well, so there's you have property taxes, you have income tax. The state is largely funded by income tax and sales tax and fees and so forth. So at the local level, most of New York County government is supported through property taxes. So it's different different types. But I think to your point is that we're spending this money where it costs a lot of money to live in New York State. The income tax, property tax. What are we getting in return? And I can tell you at the local level, I think we get a good return on what our county government does for us. At the state level, that's a different story. And there's, we have a $230 billion budget in New York State, $230 billion. And yet, despite that, there are so many needs, roads that aren't repaired, so many organizations that I can tell you aren't getting the funding, people that deal with people with disabilities that are understaffed and underpaid. All that money, where is it going? Well, it's going to support ridiculous things like $1 billion for New York City for a self-created migrant crisis. And that's the kind of thing we, the people, would push back against.
Question, way in the back.
Yes.
Hi, George.
Hey.
What do your Democratic colleagues across the aisle think about this open border? Do they support this, or is this a new wave of Democratic voters that are flowing across the border?
You know,
How could anybody support this?
The rhetoric is, well, we have to have comprehensive immigration reform. And it's no, you know, we Republicans shouldn't be talking about any of this until we have comprehensive immigration reform. And, you know, I understand, to come here legally is a long, arduous process. Well, welcome to government. I don't know anybody that's went to a government process and said, well, that was easy. It's difficult to go through any kind of a process, but when you're trying to vet someone from another country to make sure that they're not a terrorist, that they're not a criminal, that they're not bringing a disease, yes, it takes a little bit of time. And what the federal government has said is, come across the border. It doesn't really matter. And by the way, Letitia James, our Attorney General, sent a letter out to school districts saying, I realize that, first of all, you have to accept these illegal migrant children into your school, number one. Number two, I realize that there's a law that says that they have to have vaccinations, but don't worry about that for now. You can get that later. So if you're a legal citizen, if you're a legal citizen of this state, born here, children born here, and you want to send your child to school without the complete 76 vaccinations that they have to have, you can't. But if you come here as an illegal, your child can go to school without any vaccinations. That's what our Attorney General has said. Again, this is one-party rule, folks. This is what it looks like.
Okay, we're gonna take a quick time out. Bobbie Anne Cox is on the phone. After Bobbie Anne talks, we have a question from Karen.
Bobbie Anne?
Can you hear us?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi.
Can the room hear me?
Yes.
Yes, the microphone's up to the phone. Oh, okay. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm sorry that I'm calling on my phone. I'm actually driving home from an event down in Manhattan, but I just wanted to take the opportunity, when Liz said that she was going to your meeting tonight, to thank you all. So many of you came to the fundraiser on the 12th and then came to the courthouse on the 13th to watch the oral arguments. And I know many of you gave into a donation that was given to me by the Tea Party. So I just wanted to thank you all profusely, because without you guys, you know, coming and supporting and showing up and taking time out of your schedules and putting into the donation and everything, you know, it really helped, and I really appreciate it. So though I probably couldn't meet everybody at the fundraiser or at the courthouse after oral arguments, I just want you to know that I appreciate you, and I wanted to personally say thank you to all of you. So I'm sure Senator Borrello answered questions you may have had about the case and the status and whatnot, but if there are any questions, I'll answer them. But basically, we do not have a decision yet, so we're still waiting on that.
Well, thank you, Bobbie Anne, for what you've done. The sacrifice. I mean, thank you. Any questions for her, as long as she's on the phone?
Question over
One
here.
more question, not for Bobbie Anne. The grid, the national grid, this is an energy question.
Okay.
You're our expert. There are supposedly now 189 proposed solar projects for Chautauqua County in the TQ, in the list. They do not produce much power. There is no way to transmit the power. Is it great, as you've called it, boondoggle for certain moneyed people? What does our area and the rest of the state have as a protection in terms of home rule? We hear a rumor that the state is going to overrule home rule, give full tax exemption to what they call renewables,
Yeah, that's a problem. First of all, this is nothing but a big investment scam. You've heard me say this before. You know, and the worst part about it is, you know, we're eating up good farmland for the, you know, and that's, so, you know, and we have the Farmland Protection Board, and we've got the New York Farm Bureau, and they got, you know, and unfortunately some of these organizations are, you know, they're fighting a losing battle, because the first thing is Governor Cuomo created, the ORES, the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, which basically allowed them to fast track these projects, and even if it meant having to, what DEC's worried about habitats? No, we're not worried about. Oh, we're worried about, infringing on people's, encroaching on people's land. No, we're not going to worry about that. So, that was the first volley against the home rule. And now, yes, if you listen to our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, like Kevin Parker from New York City, who's the chairman of the Energy Committee, we had a debate about offshore wind on Long Island because they want to tear up some beautiful beaches in order to run the transmission lines. And he stood up and said, well, there's going to have to be a lot of sacrifice. This is a national emergency. This is a climate change. It's a climate crisis. There's going to have to be a lot of pain and a lot of sacrifice. Who's not experiencing any pain or sacrifice? Anybody in New York City. Okay, they're not sacrificing anything. But again, this is just virtue signaling, and it's going to put a lot of money into the pockets of a lot of companies and corrupt politicians that support it. That's all this is. So I made a proposal. You may have heard about this. Because, after our debate with Kevin Parker, where he said this is going to have to be a lot of sacrifice and a lot of pain, well then I proposed a bill that said every time you site a wind turbine somewhere else in New York State, you have to site one inside New York City. Because you know what? Well, where are you going to put these things? Well, it's an emergency. It's a global climate change. Put them in Central Park. You can probably put 200 of them in Central Park. Oh my God, you can't do it in Central Park. Well, you have no care about our farmland, which feeds you. You have no care about our pristine areas or our natural habitat. So put 200 of them in Central Park. You don't need that park. We're all going to die anyway, right? Because it's climate change. So, put them on top of all those tall buildings. I built the top of those tall buildings. You know what? It's windy up there all the time. So put a wind turbine on top of the Empire State Building. Put it on top of every tall building in New York City. And you'll see quickly how much of a climate crisis this is not when some multi-billionaire is watching a wind turbine and shadow flicker on his multi-million-dollar condominium in New York City. Then all of a sudden we'll see how much sacrifice and pain the people of New York City would like to do. So that's my proposal. Let them. Nice and easy. One of my favorite quotes is that the definition of a liberal is someone whose interests aren't at stake at the moment. All of a sudden, when it's hitting you in the face, it's a different story. And by the way, that we're seeing that start to happen. We're seeing some folks in New York City that are watching this migrant crisis, this self-created crisis, and they're seeing what's going on, and they're starting to see it affect their quality of life. Okay, when it was affecting the quality of life of folks down south, they didn't care. Then it was all about virtue signaling. But now it's affecting their quality of life. They are starting to wake up. And that's what it takes, folks. They need to feel the same pain that everyone else is feeling. They got to understand the same sacrifice that they expect us to make on their behalf.
Isn't there another conundrum of this whole migrant issue? Is they legally can't work and can't be hired?
Well, yeah, I mean, but and I know that there's this school of thought that if we give them work permits, but I mean, look at if you had a child and you wanted to hire someone to take care of your child, wouldn't you want to know if that person was a convicted pedophile? Wouldn't you want to know if that person was a criminal or a drug dealer? Well, so we're going to give these people work permits. They're going to fast track work permits. We have no idea what the background of these folks are. By the way, don't think that that a lot of these folks that are coming across the border, I know we have this image of these people that live in an oppressed area in a country, and they're coming here for a better life. And yeah, I'm sure a lot of them are. But also a lot of them are people who are fleeing justice in other countries. Okay, and we don't know the difference between the two. Okay, what was the last count? How many terrorists, people on the terror watch list, they've caught coming across the Mexican border into the United States.
160.
Yeah, thank you. 160. Those are the ones that they caught. Okay, so this look, and I really get sick of hearing people say, no, the border's not open. The border's not. Look, I own a restaurant. Okay, if I say the restaurant's not open, but the doors are open, lights are on, people are still going to come in. Doesn't matter if I say the restaurant's open or not. Is the border secure? Is the question. The answer is no. anyone, I don't care which side of the aisle you are, anyone who says the border is secure is lying to themselves. That's the problem.
We got time for 2 more questions.
All right.
Back there.
So there hasn't been any people dumped in the county as of now?
Well, now, there have been people that have come, but not through the New York City supply chain, if you will. There's been the program that that DOCO has, that was paid for by the mayor of New York City through using state taxpayer dollars. None of those folks have come to Chautauqua County that any of us are aware of. There have been some small groups that have come kind of on their own, still crossed the border illegally in the United States, and came here of their own volition. They weren't sent here by New York City. That to the best of anyone's knowledge. Yes.
In question in that regard, is there a rule, or is that a rule that they're not supposed to do that in Chautauqua County to bring them?
Well, yeah. So, again, our county executive declared a state of emergency, and in that state of emergency said that any landlord, hotel owner, property owner that cooperates with New York City would be in violation of the law. So someone who knowingly accepts folks coming up would be to house them and take money from this program would be in violation of the county law under the state of emergency. And like I said, you had other counties, blue counties like Erie County, that said, okay, we welcome them, and we see how that turned out. So now they don't know what to do, because now those counties are saying, whoa, no more. I mean, so now they're faced with this, again, New York City's still filling up every day, and the counties that said they were going to take them, because they had this image in their head that Erie County was going to bring in 25,000 people, and it was just going to be a wonderful thing, and they were going to be there and to help diversify the community, which is what Mark Pullencar said. We're going to help diversify the community. So what happened was it was a disaster after a few hundred showed up, and now they've all said stop. So now the question is, what happens next? And that's what, and I just spoke with PJ Wendell today. That's what NISAC and the Association of the Association of Counties and the Association of County Executives is pushing back against now, because and look, at the bottom line is, if the mayor really wanted to do something, put them on buses, send them back across the border. I mean, you could, I realize that it will require cooperation with the federal government, but I guarantee you that if the mayor of New York City and the governor of New York State said, we're going to send buses to the border with the people that you sent up here, I would imagine that the President of the United States would have to do something about it. But they don't have, unfortunately, at this point, the wherewithal to do something like that.
Second part of that question is, do you know, we live in Cattaraugus County, but last night we were at Right Thinkers, and a person there was concerned about the growing huge camp of homeless, and that it's possible that someone thought that a bus was coming by in the night.
It was rumored that they were dropping people off in the night.
Well,
do they have that same clause or whatever?
Yeah, Cattaraugus also has a state of emergency. Most of the counties here in this area, most of the the rural counties of Western New York declared states of emergency. I think it was 32 was the number of counties. So yeah, but I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. God only knows what they might try. But I would hope that something that wouldn't go unnoticed. But as far as I know, that's not the case.
I just wondered if there was anyone that was trying to investigate if that is going on in different parts, that they would definitely try to keep it quiet and unnoticed, but...
Yeah, and I will tell you that, I know there was read an article in the Post-Journal about some landlords that talked about the fact that they were approached by this DOCO company to be paid $120 a night per person, to double occupancy. Imagine getting $240 a night for some, one-bedroom apartment in Jamestown or whatever. That's a lot of money, right? But they got our money to work with. But, you know, luckily those folks recognize the fact that they'd be in violation of that emergency order. And the DOCO folk, they can't enforce that, and you know, so they're trying for sure, but at this point, you know, at least for the moment, the governor is at least, I don't want to say respecting, that's not the right word, but she's at least heeding those executive orders in various states of emergency rather, in those various counties. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
I so appreciate what George does for us in this liberal blue state. He stands out like a shining light for what freedom and liberty is all about. I so appreciate him. Thank you.